My name is Marion Blake, and I am 64. For 42 years, I kept other people's numbers straight, first at a feed mill, then at a regional hardware distributor in northern Indiana. Columns calmed me, totals obeyed. When life cracked open, ledgers still closed at zero. I became a widow at 36. Samuel, my husband, was a mechanic with a fine ear for bad bearings and a laugh that turned bad evenings tolerable. Cancer took the laugh first, and the man not long after. I kept the house, the mortgage, and 2 boys, Andrew and Leo. I don't know that I ever decided to live for them. I simply woke up each day and did. Money was thin enough to read through. So I learned the small arts of stretching, replacing buttons instead of buying coats, finding sales on pasta, teaching myself to do without. When Andrew wanted the travel league and the fee frowned at me, I opened the basement cupboard and lifted Samuel's steel toolbox. He loved that box. His hands had greased its hinges glossy. I carried it to a pawn counter. The cash stung, then vanished into a permission slip and a uniform that fit. When Leo's glove split at the seam before a Saturday game, we did not have new in the budget. I threaded dental floss through a needle and stitched leather until my fingers cramped. He slid the glove on, surprised that it closed. He ran out to warm-ups with a wave over his shoulder. I waved back, pretending the ache in my knuckles was pride. In winter, when the gas bill climbed like a ladder, I kept the thermostat low and bought Andrew the good batting gloves anyway. Warm hands hit better, the coach said. I nodded as if my own hands did not crack in the sink. People praise sacrifice when they are not the ones making it. I praised it too. I told myself it was the holiest arithmetic, subtract me, add them. I assumed the result would be love with interest. This spring, on the anniversary of the day Samuel and I married in a church that smelled of lemon oil and carnations, I set out 3 plates. I cooked beef stew the way he liked, heavy on onions and patience. I called the boys in the afternoon. Come by if you can, I said, light as I could make it. They could not. Tickets to the playoffs. Andrew explained, voice bright and already inside the noise of it. We'll swing past another night. Leo chimed in from the car, loyal to the plan that did not include me. I told them to have fun and meant the first 2 words, but not the rest. The house went quiet in the faithful ways that houses do. I ate at the corner of the table and tried not to look at the other plates. The ache across my chest began as a rubber band and then decided to be wire. I stood, or tried to, and the floor rose to meet me. The bowl broke. I heard it but could not fix it. The breath would not come when I called it by name. Some mercies wear a neighbor's slippers. Mrs. Ortega, who lives 2 porches down and grows marigolds the color of egg yolks, saw my kitchen light burning too steady. She knocked, then let herself in with a voice that knows when to do both. The siren that followed drew red and blue across my cabinets like holiday lights that forgot their season. Night in an intensive care unit is not a night at all. It is a string of fluorescent minutes. A young nurse with a neat bun warmed my hand between hers and told me to keep my eyes on the ceiling tile and breathe to it. I tried. I tried harder when the Dr. Patel, according to the stitched letters on his coat, asked for a number to call. I gave him Andrew's first, then Leo's. I heard both conversations. You hear everything when your body is too tired to speak for you. Your mother may not make it through the night, the doctor said into the line, careful, professional, carrying more kindness than his shift could afford. Andrew answered with a promise to check in later. They were at the game. It had already started, the traffic, the cost of the tickets. Leo's voice came smaller in the background, agreement without courage. The doctor repeated himself softly as if phrasing could change math. It did not. There are sentences that make a room louder by taking sound away. I lay there with the oxygen whispering and machines clicking and felt something important settle into its final place. It was not death. I was too stubborn for that. It was a clearer ledger than any I had kept years of giving on one side, one single choice on the other. For the first time, the numbers refused to lie. The nurse stayed after the calls. She pressed her palm around my fingers, a quiet bridge. I'm here, she said, and it counted. The ceiling tile above my bed had a gray fleck shaped like a comma. I stared at that comma and understood that my life had been one long dependent clause, useful, obedient, and always waiting for someone else's sentence to finish it. The thought arrived without drama and with absolute precision. Sacrifice is not the same thing as love. Love is love. Sacrifice, when it is invisible long enough, turns into permission for other people to forget you. Could I have a pen? I asked the nurse when the worst of the pain stepped back. She nodded and brought hospital stationery, blue-inked and expectant. I did not write yet. I would, but not yet. I rested my hand on the paper and let the machines count for me. Somewhere in a stadium, my sons were cheering. In a room bright as morning, I learned how to stop being an afterthought. I closed my eyes and kept the paper near. Part of me was already writing. Night in the ICU never really darkens. It is a bright wobble of minutes, a string of beeps and soft shoes and plastic curtains that sigh when someone passes. The nurse with the neat bun introduced herself as Jenna Mora after the calls were made. She tucked a warmed blanket around my shoulders as if I were something fragile but worth the care. "Your heart worked very hard," she said, checking the line at my wrist. "Let the machines carry the heavy lifting tonight." I nodded. Nodding cost less than words. The pain had moved from an iron bar to a tight band, and I could breathe again without bargaining for it. Outside my window, a slice of town glowed, the orange wash of a lot light and empty intersection. Snow piles turned gray by headlights. Somewhere beyond the hospital, a stadium roared, then roared louder. That sound did not reach this floor, not really. It lived only in the places of me that remembered standing under light standards with a paper cup of coffee growing cold in my hands. Jenna adjusted the oxygen and then, unasked, took my hand. "I'll be here a while," she said. "If you need anything, blink at me. I'll get it." It is embarrassing how much comfort a simple promise carries when your children will not. I stared at the ceiling tile with the gray comma fleck and tried to count my breaths until the counting felt like prayer. In the small hours, the heart monitor made a slower music. A custodian hummed down the hall. An elderly man 3 curtains over argued with the dream version of his late wife and then apologized to the air. I slept in thin strips. Between them, memory wandered where it pleased. I saw Samuel by the garage polishing a torque wrench with a rag that always ended up dirtier than before. I saw Andrew asleep in his first uniform hat, still on the visor, crooked from nerves. I saw Leo at the kitchen table, tongue pressed to his lip as he traced spelling words, then abandoning the pencil to draw a catcher's mask with dramatic bars. I saw a metal toolbox matte with age, as solid as a promise. My hand reached for it and closed on nothing but sheet. Near dawn, when machines blinked their soft greens and the nurses changed shifts in a choreography of clipboards, Jenna brought a pen and a stack of hospital stationery without my asking. "Figured you might be a writer," she said lightly. "You kept patting the bedside table all night." "Numbers," I said, voice a rasp. "I kept numbers. Writing is new. First time for everything." She slid the tray across my lap, angled the paper, and set the pen where my right hand could find it without hunting. "Take your time. No one is rushing you." When you keep books, you learn to begin with the header date account purpose so the ledger tells the truth, even if the reader is careless. I did the same here. At the top, I printed, "To Andrew Blake and Leo Blake," read to the end. For a long while, the page stayed white under my careful header. Words crowded my chest and then refused to line up. I was surprised at the weight of them. For decades, I had swallowed sentences whole and stood up from the table as if they had fed me. Now, when I finally set a plate for myself, I could not choose the first bite. I began with a small fact. Small facts can hold a house. "Boys," I wrote and paused. The word looked wrong. "You are both men by law and calendar." But I do not know how to say men when my mind holds you at 9 and 7 or 12 and 10 or 15 and 13. Door-slamming years that smelled of wet cleats and microwave burritos. Andrew and Leo. If you are reading this here, it means I was moved before you arrived. That is not a scold. It is a plain description the kind numbers prefer. My hand shook. Jenna steadied the tray without speaking. I went on. "I do not want to hurt you. I want to be seen by you just once as a person with a past, not a background appliance that hums and keeps the lights on. I pawned your father's toolbox the spring Andrew made the travel roster. He would have wanted me to choose you over steel. When Leo's glove split, I stitched it with floss because thread cut the leather and floss did not. In winter, I turned the thermostat down and told you we were toughing it while I layered socks. I corrected fractions with numb fingers and said it was nothing. If I did these things in silence, it was because I thought silence was holy. I thought giving without ledger entries would build a kind of love that didn't need receipts. Silence is not holy if it erases the giver. I stopped, rested the pen, and let my eyes close. Behind my lids, 2 little boys surfed a couch cushion like it was a boat, and the living room floor was floodwater. The smaller one, Leo, always the dramatist, shouted orders in a pirate accent and made his brother laugh hard enough to hiccup. I had forgotten that afternoon until now. Not every memory bled. Some were clean and bright and survived on their own goodness. The pen came back to my hand. "Last night, a doctor told each of you I might die. Each of you chose not to come. There are reasons, always reasons, traffic money spent on tickets, the flow of a crowd, a plan made in advance. I am old enough to know reasons are real. I am also old enough to know choices matter more than reasons. If this is the first time anyone has said that to you without cushioning it, then I apologize for my part in the delay. I protected you from a world that does not owe protection, and I called that love." The letters blurred. I set the pen down and turned the page face down as if it were shy. On the bedside chair, my purse sagged open, fossilized with receipts and spare change, and a chapstick that left a waxy halo on everything it touched. I asked Jenna to hand it to me. She did, placing it in my lap like a bread loaf. Deep in a zip pocket lived the thing I had been thinking about since the first line, a fading slip from Franklin Pawn and Repair. The pawn ticket for Samuel's toolbox. I had kept it not because I hoped to buy the box back, we never did, but because paper proves a moment in a way memory sometimes refuses to do. The date printed in purple ink, the item described dryly, metal tool chest contents, variable the amount in block digits that had once felt like a cliff and now looked like a number a person could pay and not starve. I slid the ticket between the stationery sheets. If the boys came to the bed and opened the letter, they would have to touch that paper. They would have to place their fingers where mine had placed a different kind of faith. Jenna returned with fresh ice chips. "Do you want someone to read what you've written?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "It isn't a script, it's a ledger. I don't want it performed." She nodded in a way that made me think she had a mother somewhere who carpeted whole houses with silence of her own. "I'll tape it to the footboard when you say so. If you're moved, it moves with you." Later that morning, a familiar voice slid around the curtain before its owner did. "You can't scare me like this, Marion. I'm not young enough to be scared so hard." Mrs. Ortega shuffled in a cardigan thrown over a house dress patterned with lemons. Her gray hair was braided in two tidy ropes. She smelled faintly of flour. Her hands were chapped in a way only bakers' and former field workers' hands are chapped. "You brought the whole kitchen," I whispered. "I brought conchas," she said, setting a paper bag on the chair, "which you cannot eat yet. But you can smell them and remember that the world contains sugar. That is sometimes enough." Her eyes went to the sheet of paper turned upside down on my lap. She did not ask. She sat, folded her hands, and studied my face the way people study a weather map, looking for fronts and breaks. "Do your boys know?" "About the letter," I said. "About you," she said, gentle but plain. "About what it costs to be you." "They know I make lists," I said, and tried to smile. "They know I like stew with too much onion." "That is not knowing. That is trivia." She leaned closer. "Do they know you sold a piece of your husband to buy a piece of their childhood? Do they know you wore 2 pairs of socks so they could wear 1 pair of batting gloves? Do they know you laughed at your own hunger so they could ride buses to away games they barely remember?" Something inside me slumped with relief at being named. "No," I said. "Because I thought a good mother smooths the story. I thought a good mother made the rough parts disappear." "And how did that work?" Her voice was dry as toast. "I made myself disappear along with the rough parts," I said. Mrs. Ortega did not say, "I told you so," though I could hear the ghost of every porch conversation woven into the quiet. She reached across and rested her warm palm on my forearm, a bridge like Jenna's, but older, heavier, more practiced. "I had a girl," she said after a moment, staring past my shoulder. "She is 47 now. When I had gallbladder trouble 10 years ago. I spent a night in a room like this one with a beeping like this one. She did not come. It was a birthday party for a man who would be gone a year later, and he got the night. I forgave her 3 different ways. It was not forgiveness. It was excuses." She refocused on me. "We teach people how to treat us, not always not in everything, but more than we like to admit." "You taught your daughter differently after that?" I asked. "I learned how to stop rehearsing my gratitude for crumbs," she said. "I set out a plate for myself. At first I sat there and stared at it. Then I ate. It was strange, and then it was good." I laughed, and the monitor scolded me with a spike of sound. "You always make sense when I am too tired for poetry," I said. "Then let me say it without poetry," she replied. "If they do not arrive when a doctor says come now, they do not deserve to be the first phone calls next time. Make different lists." She did not stay long. She believes in mercy, measured, not smothering. Before she left, she lifted the bag of sweetbreads and let the air escape, sugared and warm. When she was gone, I fell asleep to the smell of vanilla and cinnamon and woke up feeling for the first time in a day like a body that might belong to me again. By afternoon, Dr. Patel said the numbers looked better. "You scared us," he said, half smiling, "but I think you only wanted attention." "From the wrong audience," I murmured. He raised a brow not unkindly. "Do you want me to try them again?" he asked, meaning the sons. "No," I said. "Try me again. I'm still here." That evening, I turned the letter right side up and read it as if someone else had written it. It did not whine. It did not accuse. It accounted. I added 3 lines at the end. "When you are ready to talk, arrive as men. Not as customers at a service counter, not as boys with a story about traffic. You will be met by a woman who will no longer trade her blood for your comfort. I love you. That is not the same as funding you. Mom." I underlined love and left funding alone. Then I slid the pawn ticket deeper between the pages and gave the envelope to Jenna. "If I moved, please put this on the bed," I said. "If I'm discharged before they come, leave it here. They know where I was." "I will," she said. "Do you want me to add a note on the outside?" "Write their names," I said, "and read to the end. They will be tempted to stop at the paragraph that hurts." She smiled at that, a quick flash of approval, and printed in a nurse's square hand, "Andrew and Leo read to the end." 2 days later, I went home. "Only because you are stubborn," Dr. Patel said, making a note. And because you have a neighbor who will check on you whether you like it or not. I like it, I said. Against my personality, I like it. Mrs. Ortega drove me in her truck, which smells like cumin and old upholstery. She gave the nurse's station a tin of cookies as a bribe to keep an eye out. The receptionist promised to misplace them in exactly the right direction. On the way down to the main doors, I asked Jenna if the letter still sat where she had taped it. She nodded. Foot of the bed, she said. Looks official. No one will throw it out. Good, I said. That bed has had my back long enough. It can hold a letter for a week. Home is a word that behaves itself until you walk into it after a hospital. Then it becomes a creature. It moves around you. The light is too golden. The sink is too low. The chair that fit your body 3 days ago feels like a stranger's idea of comfort. I shuffled through my rooms, touching objects the way a blind woman learns a new space. The stove knob was familiar. The stack of bills by the phone was not welcome, but not a shock. The picture of Samuel in his coveralls, forearms smudged with grease and contentment, caught my breath for a small second and then gave it back. Mrs. Ortega made tea and stood at the counter to drink hers as she always does. Chairs are for company is her rule, and she will not call herself company in my house because she thinks that would be bragging. Will they come? She asked, eyes on the steam. They will come when the stadium is quiet, I said. Men are brave when the crowd is with them. It takes a different muscle to walk into a quiet room. Do you have that muscle? She said. I am growing it, I said. It hurts in a good way. The phone did not ring that night. I slept the way exhausted children sleep on my side, with one hand under my cheek, drool unbecoming but honest. In the morning, I watered the spider plant and felt this surprised me, some measure of contentment at the very smallness of the task. Numbers ruled entire inventories for me once. Now a plant with thin legs bowed to my care as if I were enough for it. 3 days after discharge, Jenna called from the nurse's station. They were here, she said without preamble. I thought you would want to know. I sat down without telling my knees to both. Yes, she said. Together. It was in the morning. They looked like men who had planned not to look like boys and then forgot how to do it at the door. What did they do? I asked, trying to keep my voice from sounding like the past. They went quiet, she said. That was the first thing. The second thing is they behaved like they were at a funeral and expected someone to tell them where to stand. No one did so. They stood near the foot and read. The envelope, did it work? Did they read to the end? They did, she said. They each took turns holding it. The taller one, Andrew. Yes, I said. He read the first half. His mouth got tight at your sentence about reasons and choices. He looked at me like I might interrupt for his comfort. I did not. I only pointed to the line that said, read to the end, and he went on. When he reached the pawn ticket, he didn't understand what it was until Leo explained it in a whisper. Then he understood. I pictured it, their heads bowed over paper like altar boys, their mouths learning shapes they had never practiced. It made my chest ache in the same place the wire had been. Not pain, something complicated and necessary. And Leo, I asked. He read the last part aloud, Jenna said. Soft. Like he was trying to get the words right, even if he couldn't make them make sense. When he reached the line about arriving as men, he stopped and swallowed. He handed the letter back to Andrew and stepped away like the bed had teeth. I closed my eyes and saw Leo at 8 being brave about the first day of school by refusing to let me walk him to the door. Bravery is a strange suit. We all outgrow the one that first fit us and forget to buy another. Did they say anything to you? I asked. Not to me, she said. To each other, yes. Nothing noble. The kind of small bickering people do when the truth is a size too big to try on. What did they do with the letter? They folded it badly and then carefully, she said. They each tried to put it in a pocket that was not big enough. In the end, Andrew held it like a program at a ceremony. They left together. No one thanked me. It was not my thanks to want. I thanked her. Then I sat in the kitchen and stared at the spot on the table where a third chair used to live. I had given that chair to a neighbor last spring, downsizing for the sake of space, I told myself then. Now I understood I had been practicing for a different economy. That afternoon, Andrew called. The name on the screen pulled at the old chords. I let it ring once, twice, and then I answered. I said his name. He said mine like a question. Mom. Yes. We were at the hospital today, he said, and then paused like a man who cannot locate his next word. We read what you wrote. I know, I said. Jenna called. Silence. Then you kept the pawn ticket. Yes, I said. Paper tells stories when people won't. Another silence, longer. I could hear traffic through his window, the distant rhythm of a crossing signal. I don't have a speech, he said finally. I thought I might. On the way there, I wrote something in my head about how complicated life is, and how we were already in the stadium and how leaving would have been hard. And then I read what you wrote, and the speech sounded like a receipt for excuses. I am not the cashier, I said. I don't take returns. He made a small sound shock or the beginning of a laugh that didn't want to be laughter. Leo said we should come by tonight, he added his voice, adjusting to a plan as if plans could fix. We can talk then, we can. No, I said, and felt how gentle it could be to say a word like that. Not tonight. I'm not ready to host you. I am not ready to perform the mother who feeds you while you drink my last explanations. What do you want then, he asked, not angry, bewildered. I want you to take what you read and carry it like grown men for a while, I said. Carry it without handing it back to me. I want you to think about reasons and then think about choices and learn the difference without me making a chart. I want you to call Leo and talk to him as a brother rather than an ally. That's a lot, he said. Less than I have carried, I said not unkindly. He did not argue. He did not apologize. He said he would call again when he had something other than a plan. We ended the call like people who need to protect a fragile bridge by not stampeding across it. I set the phone down and made tea. The steam rose in its little ghost, the sound of the kettle, a domestic heartbeat. I carried the cup to the window and watched a pair of kids plow their way down the sidewalk, backpacks like shell's hats too big. One of them stopped to retie the other's lace. It was nothing. It was everything. 3 hours later, Leo left a voicemail. His voice broke twice. He did not notice it breaking the second time. Mom, I don't know how to... I read the part where you said you want to be seen, he said. I don't know how to do that yet, but I heard you. I heard you this time. I did not call back. I let the words land and cool. Then I opened the drawer by the stove where I keep notepads and grocery lists and the spare pen that never writes on the first try. I wrote new list at the top and then one item under it. Find a lawyer who understands living trusts. I looked at the line a long time, the clean black look of it, the way it did not require anyone else's permission to be true. I did not know exactly what I would put in the documents yet. I only knew I would stop paying in the currency that had nearly cost me my life. I slid the notepad back into the drawer and stood there with my hand on the wood pulse, steady under the heel of my palm. For years, I had been the person who made sure everyone got where they were going, even if it meant I never arrived anywhere on my own. Now at last I knew which door I would walk through next. And if they wanted to knock on it one day, they would have to do it with their hands empty of excuses. The week after I wrote the new list, I took a cab downtown to an office with frosted glass and a name painted in clean serif Whitman and Cole Community Law. The waiting room smelled of old carpet shampoo and newly opened envelopes. Diplomas lined the wall in a patient grid. A photograph of the county baseball diamond hung behind the receptionist, as if the town had voted to keep its myth visible. Hal Whitman was 60 maybe, with a tie that had seen more hearings than weddings. He had the quiet posture of a man who does not need his voice to be large. He read my chart from the hospital. Jenna had forwarded the release with my permission, and then set it aside with both hands as if setting a table. How can I help, he asked. I want papers that match my life and not the version my sons assume I said. A living trust, medical directives, clear boundaries that won't melt if someone cries. He nodded. Tell me your wishes. We'll make the paper brave enough to hold them. I told him the house could be sold. Debts of mine were to be paid before anyone looked for inheritance. A scholarship in Samuel Blake's name should be funded first, modest local for a kid whose talent outpaced the family budget. My sons were not cut out of anything, but they would not stand first in line simply because they had staked a claim in their minds. And I wanted Mrs. Miriam Ortega listed as an emergency contact, the person who knocked when the lights burned wrong. Whitman's pen moved like a metronome. You're not the first person to shift legacy from rescue to investment, he said, but you are the clearest about why. Rescue kept everyone the same, I said. Investment might change someone. He slid sample clauses across the desk and read each aloud, not because I couldn't read, but because he understood that hearing your own new life spoken back to you helps it feel real. We adjusted phrases the way a tailor pins hems. On the last page, he paused. This paragraph, he said, tapping the line about my sons not being primary beneficiaries, will sting them. Not as much as the ICU, I said, and he didn't argue. I signed slowly, grateful for ink that behaved. When the folder was closed, Whitman leaned back and regarded me the way a coach looks at an athlete stretching a muscle she'd neglected. One more thing, he said. If you want the scholarship dispersed this season, the Community Foundation meets next Tuesday. I can make an introduction. Please, I said. I've spent enough seasons in Bleachers. I'd like to put money on the field. On my way out, I stopped at a locksmith. The house wasn't unsafe. I just needed to feel that the door answered to me. That evening, Mrs. Ortega sat at my table while I sorted keys into little piles. I slid a new one across to her. You'll be listed on the papers, I said. You saved my life. It seems fair to give you the shortcut to the door. She wiped her eyes with a practicality that didn't belong to tears. I will water the plant and scold you if you overdo it, she said. Both are part of the job. Calls came and I let them roll to voicemail. The messages tried on tones like hats concern logistics defensiveness. Andrew wanted to know what percentage meant what. Leo wanted to know whether we could talk before lawyers made it weird. I wrote a sentence on an index card and tucked it by the phone. My love is free. My money is not. Reading it kept my voice from wandering. 2 days later, Andrew arrived without calling first. He still had the letter from the hospital folded into an uneasy square as if smooth paper might make the message smoother too. He stood in my kitchen the way people stand in a courtroom they don't believe applies to them. You could have told us, he began. I did, I said, gesturing toward the paper in his hand. I mean before, years ago. That would have been better, I admitted, but I hadn't learned how to speak to men without first saving boys. He looked at the table and frowned. Where are the extra chairs? Given away, I said. If someone wants to belong here, they can bring their own chair. If they don't want to belong, I won't dust a place for them. He winced. Is this punishment? It's a boundary, I said. Punishment is about the past. Boundaries are about my future. He ran a hand over his jaw as if rearranging the beard might arrange his thoughts. You started a scholarship, he said, almost accusing. I started a legacy that doesn't require me to disappear, I replied. I have funded your urgencies for 20 years. I'm choosing a different urgency. He inhaled to argue and found no oxygen there. For a moment, I saw the boy who cried when he lost his hat, and the teenager who pretended to be brave in case bravery would loan him its shape. He touched the letter again, that awkward square, then tucked it carefully into his pocket as if the cloth could learn to hold it. Leo will say I didn't try, he muttered. You can tell him you tried, I said. Then you can try again differently. When he left, the room felt bigger, not because I had won, but because I had not surrendered the floor. I made tea and stood by the window for the whole steep, watching a delivery van reverse down the street with its beeping small and apologetic. That night, I slept like a door that fits its frame. The Community Foundation's office lived above the old post office. Scuffed stairs, bulletin boards layered with flyers for blood drives and yoga in the park. Janice Holloway, the director, wore glasses on a chain and the patient smile of a person who is always explaining math to feelings. We can structure this as a named fund, she said, sliding a form toward me. The Samuel Blake Field Grant. Gear travel fees training the unglamorous pieces that block a kid who has talent but not cash. Perfect, I said. I know those pieces intimately. We also ask donors to write a short note about why the fund exists, she added. Recipients read them. It makes money feel less like an algorithm. I wrote in plain ink, Samuel loved work that made things run engines, families, small towns. This fund is for the young person whose effort outpaces their means. May you never feel alone in the bleachers. Janice smiled without being sentimental. Applications come in waves, she said. Sometimes it's a tide, sometimes a trickle. But there is always one kid who makes you remember why you got out of bed. On the way home, I drove past the public library, red brick tall windows, and saw a one-bedroom apartment with a for lease sign 2 doors down. The building had a narrow balcony with peeling paint, a maple tree shouldering the sidewalk, and exactly the kind of modesty that would not ask me for more than I had. I wrote down the number. That evening, I walked through my house and touched each thing with a question, do you serve a life I still want? Half the objects failed the interview. I boxed what made sense and called a thrift shop for the rest. Mrs. Ortega helped me pack. She wrapped dishes in newspaper and told the plates, don't you dare break. She's already broken enough. We laughed and the plates obeyed. When moving day came, 2 teenagers from her church carried my couch like it meant nothing to gravity. I tipped them more than the job required because sometimes money is best spent on lifting. The apartment smelled of fresh paint and dust that would soon belong to me. I set the plant on the sill and the kettle on the stove and a photo of Samuel on a bookshelf that used to live in the boys' room. The rooms were small enough to confess their corners. I breathed differently there, longer exhales, fewer apologies. In the afternoon, I walked across to the bakery. The clerk was young with freckles that made her look trustworthy. She boxed a chocolate cake with too much frosting and slid it across as if handing over a diploma. Special occasion, she asked out of habit. Yes, I said, I'm practicing celebration. Back home, I put 1 plate on the table. I lit a single candle because ceremony deserves flame. For decades, I told the air I served, everyone slices and ate the crumbs. Tonight, I remember how it feels to be first at my own table. The cake was rich and a little ridiculous. It tasted like permission. In the evening, an envelope arrived from the Foundation acknowledgement of the fund tax, language, and a note in Janice's tidy script. We already have a candidate you should meet. 14 catcher, first girl on her team. Mom works double shifts. If you're willing, come to the committee next Thursday. Attached was a photocopy of a handwritten application. The name Emilia Cortez tilted across the top in careful, hopeful cursive. I pressed my thumb to the paper the way you test a bruise. It hurt in the right way. Somewhere 2 blocks away, a horn honked twice. Somewhere miles away, a stadium emptied into traffic. Somewhere in my phone, 2 voicemails waited without power over my evening. I washed the plate, left it to dry, and stood on the small balcony, watching the maple's shadow climb the brick as the sun slid west. The air had the mildness of a night that does not intend to harm. Inside, the note from the foundation lay open on the table, next to a set of keys labeled with new tags Home Mail M. Ortega. I had moved more than furniture. The space inside my life had been measured cut-hem to fit a woman I recognized. Next Thursday would bring introductions and decisions, and a girl with a catcher's mask larger than her face. Before that, there would be ordinary days, laundry, library, tea, and I would live them without waiting for a knock that did not come. The phone buzzed once, twice, and stilled. I let it. The cake box glowed faintly in the lamplight, ridiculous and perfect. The committee met in the high-ceilinged room above the old post office, where paint peeled in dignified curls, and the windows made the afternoon look kinder than it was. Folding chairs formed a horseshoe around a table with a plastic pitcher of water and a tray of cookies that tasted of refrigerator. People introduced themselves in the city hall way, first names functions a joke that had done its duty too many times. Janice Holloway called the meeting to order and slid a list in front of me. "We'll save the Blake Fund for last," she whispered. "Endings deserve attention." Applications were read, argued, weighed. Gear is expensive even when it's cheap. Hotels for away games turn into arithmetic problems nobody teaches you in algebra. At the bottom of the stack, Janice tapped a folder. "Emilia Cortez," she said to the room. "Catcher. Freshman. First girl on her team. Mom works nights at the clinic. Coach writes like a man who still believes in nouns." They brought Emilia and her mother in from the hallway. The girl stood with her feet set, like she knew plates and how to guard them. A catcher's mitt hung from a strap on her backpack like another shoulder. The mother's scrub top had a cartoon print that tried hard to be cheery. Her eyes had the careful brightness of a person who has learned to smile without leaking. Janice nodded to me. I stood up, hands folded over the edge of my folder as if it were a pulpit. Words came easier than I expected. Truth often does once you stop borrowing from your own future to buy other people's comfort. "My husband's name was Samuel," I said. "He could make engines stop complaining. We didn't have grand things, but we kept things running. This fund is for a young person whose effort outruns the money in the drawer. It will cover the unglamorous pieces, gear travel time, so that talent doesn't have to wait its turn behind cash." Emilia lifted her chin half an inch, the way you move when a pitch is on you faster than your mind can explain it. I opened my folder and took out a small cloth-bound ledger book, the kind I used before computers made neatness less noble. On the inside cover, I had written in block letters that didn't need flourish. "Keep your own score. Don't let anyone write you into the margin." I handed it to her. She took it with both hands, the way you accept something you are not sure you deserve yet. "Thank you," she said, a catcher's voice, low, clear, no fear of dirt. Her mother's breath hitched and then steadied. The vote was easy. Janice stamped the form with a purple seal that made it look more official than the town's budget ever did. After pictures and handshakes and cookies that collapsed into sweet dust, Emilia came back to me. "My coach says catchers have to see the whole field," she said. "I don't yet. I get stuck on the box, but I'll learn." "You will," I said. "Sometimes the only way to see the field is to stop apologizing for standing where you stand." On the walk home, I passed the stadium lights sleeping against a pale sky. They looked like metal flowers that only bloom for noise. I touched the fence out of habit and kept going. 2 blocks from my apartment, my phone buzzed. Leo. I let it go to voicemail and listened near the window with the maple shadow climbing the brick. "Mom," he said. His voice did not try to sound like anything but itself. Andrew and I are not good. We blame each other because it's easier than looking in a real mirror. I owe money I don't have. Andrew lost his job and keeps pretending he's interviewing when he's not. We read your letter and we keep pretending that means we did something. We didn't. I want to come by." I made tea and put 2 cups on the counter and then put one back. I called him. "Not tonight," I said, "but Saturday 10 o'clock, meet me on the library steps. We'll walk. Talking is better at 3 miles an hour." He laughed in relief. 3 miles an hour I can do. Saturday was honest weather, blue and ordinary. Leo waited on the library steps in a cap he had stopped wearing backward. We walked the creek path where the town pretends it lives in a postcard. He started with sports headlines and slid unbracketed into confession missed payments a car. He couldn't afford a habit of apologizing with plans instead of change. "I can help with the plans," I said, "but not with the money. I'm not a lender anymore. I'm your mother. That's the job I want back." "What does that job do?" he asked Ernest, because he had never asked the question before. "It tells the truth. It keeps a chair open for dinner if you're the man who can sit in it without bringing a fire to my table. It walks with you. It does not underwrite your lack of courage." He nodded. He did not ask for a check. He asked for a list. We sat on a bench and wrote 1 call the credit counselor, sell the car, text an apology to the 2 friends he owed instead of inventing a new excuse, set an alarm for mornings and obey it. When we finished, he exhaled the way you do after a sprint. "Will you tell Andrew to walk with us?" he asked. "I'll tell him where I am," I said. "He can decide how fast he wants to learn." He showed up the next week, jaw tight, hands open. We walked without touching the hard parts for half a mile. Then I told him the story of the pawn ticket, how the paper had lived in my purse beside every grocery list and appointment card like a quiet witness. He stopped and pressed his fingers to his eyes. "I thought I knew the cost of my life," he said. "Turns out I only knew the price of the things I wanted." "That's a start," I said, knowing the difference. He didn't ask for money either. He asked if he could come to the community center and help. Not because of optics, he added, discovering the right word. Because my life is small and I need it to be less small for the right reasons. "Thursday nights," I said. "Janice will make you carry folding chairs until you remember that service is not a photo opportunity." He grinned a boy again for the heartbeat it takes to grin than a man. "Chairs I can carry," he said. They came for tea the Sunday after that, one at a time, like men who understood traffic patterns. I kept 2 chairs at the table and poured without sermon. Mrs. Ortega stopped by long enough to enforce seconds on cookies and to give them a look that managed to be blessing and warning at once. When they left, they washed the cups without being asked. The second time they came, they brought their own chairs from the trunk and set them down without ceremony. I did not say a word. I only noticed that the legs didn't wobble. News travels in a town built for porches. People told me Andrew found work less title, more dignity. Leo sold the car and took a job disassembling returns at a warehouse. The manager said he was good at finding the broken thing that made everything else not work. He gets that from his grandfather, I said to no one, and to Samuel at once. The scholarship ceremony took place in the community gym, a banner the color of enthusiasm, a microphone that pretended not to be afraid of feedback. Amelia wore a clean uniform, the mitt tucked like a secret under her arm. When they called her name, she walked like a person who intends to keep walking. Janice said the script words. I said a few of my own without paper. I thought love meant subtraction, I told the small crowd. Subtract me, add you. I learned late that love multiplies only when everyone brings a whole number. Today we add Amelia. That's good math. After the clapping and the photographs, Amelia, between me and her mother Ledger, pressed flat against her chest like a shield. The girl pulled me aside. My coach says I set up too far inside, she said. He says I give away the outside corner because I don't trust my throw. Trust it, I said. And if you miss while trying the thing you want. She nodded so sharply her ponytail drew an exclamation point in the air. Her mother held my hands and did not say thank you. She said, I will show up too. It was the best sentence in the room. Later that month, I moved the last box off the apartment floor and realized the space was finally mine and not a project. I put the Ledger's twin, the one I kept for myself, on the shelf beneath Samuel's picture. The entries were small but accurate. Doctor follow-up, kept rent paid on time. Thursday walk, Saturday tea, no withdrawals made under duress. Numbers do not love you, but they do not lie to you either. On a quiet evening, the boys came by together after volunteering. Their shirts smelled faintly of dust and the clean fatigue of chairs stacked 10 high. We ate simple food. We did not talk about money. We did talk about Amelia throwing out a runner at second with a snap that made the bleachers gasp. We talked about Mrs. Ortega's marigolds, stubborn and galactic in their small way. We talked about work that paid and work that mattered, and how sometimes they cross and sometimes they don't. When they left, they hugged me in the doorway. Not the clutching hug that asks you to fix something, the ordinary hug that says we are here. I stood there a minute after the door shut, hand on the knob, pulse steady. I still buy a slice of cake once a month. Sometimes I invite Mrs. Ortega to share it. Sometimes I eat the whole piece alone and do not apologize to any god I believe in. The plant on the sill leans toward the light and then corrects itself after I rotate the pot. Balance is an amateur sport. You get better by showing up. I do not know what my sons will do with the rest of their lives. I do not monitor their bank accounts, their promises, or their disappointments. I do not rescue them. I walk with them when they choose a path that holds. When I cannot sleep, I picture the stadium from a distance. Not the seats or the noise, just the dark geometry of a field under lights. I imagine a catcher setting up exactly where she intends to be. I imagine the ball snapping home late by a fraction, then on time. I imagine the ledger open to a page with room for another line. I used to believe I was an afterthought. I know better now. I am a whole sentence. I wrote it myself. And when I set 2 chairs at the table, it is not to display absence. It is to honor the rule I live by, and if you wish to be here, bring yourself, not your excuses, not your bill. My love is free. My money is not. My life belongs to me. On the balcony, evening smooths the brick into one long kindness. The maple lifts its hands to the little wind and puts them down again. Inside the ledger waits the next entry, blank and patient. I pour tea. I take my seat. I'm not waiting for anyone to arrive before I begin. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.